It's over. You can't defy him.
Watch us, mate.
He is the one who grabbed the sun.
Look how slick he's fooled you, war boy.
He's a lying old man.
By his hand, we'll be lifted up.
That's why we have his logo seen on our backs. Breeding stone, battle fodder.
No, I am awaiting.
You're an old man battle fodder, killing everyone and everything.
We're not to blame.
Then who killed the world?
Hello and welcome to the Super 70 Podcast, episode 30, Mad Max Fury Road. I will be using the Mad Max quadrilogy on Blu-ray, issued in Canada in 2016 and rated 13 plus for violence. If you press play on your Blu-ray player now, this podcast should sync with the rest of the film. We open with a rusted metal version of the Warner Brothers logo. This is what you would expect a steel insignia on a car to look like decades after most life has ended on Earth. Spreading around the logo is a fluid, most likely gasoline, the second most desirable form of currency in George Miller's post-apocalyptic vision. Then you hear a V8 engine start and rev through several hundred revolutions. A V8 engine is an 8-cylinder piston engine which has two banks of 4 cylinders that share a common crankshaft. One revolution of the crankshaft will thus pump 2 pistons into 2 cylinders at the same time. Given a long enough crankshaft in a V8 formation, one crank will pump 8 pistons into 8 cylinders at the same time. This does more than just create a more efficient engine, as a V8 engine runs at almost half the amount of the needed resource of gasoline. The V8 formation also creates twice as much horsepower. A 2023 Honda Civic ES 5-speed has a 4-cylinder block engine that produces 205 horsepower. By contrast, a 2023 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500 has 760 horsepower, more than 3 times the Civic. We open with an image that should be the poster of Mad Max Fury Road, which is our protagonist, Max Rakatansky, standing next to his police interceptor, the same car wrecked in the Road Warrior. Though this car was deemed worthless by the year 2000, this prop interceptor sold at auction in Sydney, Australia in 2020 for $250,000. This scene starts a 30-minute sequence that staggers the imagination. And to discuss it scene by scene with me in the hacienda is Mr. Dave Anderson. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today.
Greetings and thanks for inviting.
This film I saw in the theater in 2015 in Calgary, Alberta, and it was and is batshit crazy. That was my impression.
Yeah, it's a movie that shouldn't work just due to its history and the background and the time between Thunderdome. So when was Thunderdome?
1986? 1987?
So almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, it's been replicated this year with the success of Top Gun Maverick, which has probably got some pretty good synergies and analogs, but...
Well, and taking into account that Fury Road, like all of the Mad Max movies, you don't have to watch any of the previous movies. It's not like one is... They're all pretty independent films.
Yeah, they are certainly not the MCU world building where if you miss one, you're completely lost. They stand alone, but do work with the other ones.
So this is the Citadel that we see in the distance, which reading the book that you gave me recently by Kyle Buchanan, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, I learned a lot of things in that book that I didn't previously know, which was the name of the Citadel. Now, in case you were... this reminded me a lot of Thunderdome when he starts out the movie looking like some feral animal, and then they shave his locks.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, this almost looks like a parallel version of Thunderdome. Maybe not a version per se, but an alternate timeline post-Road Warrior.
This tattoo on his back reads, in case you didn't look it up, Day 12,045. Height 10 hands. 180 pounds. No name. No lumps. No bumps. Full, clean life. 2 good eyes. No busted limbs. Piss. Okay. Genitals intact. Multiple scars. Heals fast. O+. High octane. Universal donor. Lone road warrior. Run down on Powder Lakes. V8. No gasoline. No supplies. Isolate. Psychotic. Keep muzzled. 12,045 days is 33 years, theoretically, the same year that Christ was martyred, but also Byron Kennedy, George Miller's close friend and producer on the first 2 films, was 33 when he died in a plane crash before Thunderdome went into pre-production.
Interesting.
Now, these are the War Boys, which instantly I like the setup, which is a lot of them have lumps or bumps, which I am guessing is some form of very common cancer that's been going around, which alludes to some sort of fallout situation, which means that we're living in a post-nuclear.
Which is referenced in the opening crawl during the voiceovers as to what the cause of the catastrophe we're observing is.
Well, in the end of Thunderdome, there's that scene that the post-credit sequence, not post-credit, it's like an epilogue, which I don't particularly like, which is kind of like the ruins of Sydney, and they're trying to start, the kids are trying to start the civilization again, and it's very obvious that something very bad happened to Sydney, and it didn't seem to me like that would be a place that you would want to go back to. The credit sequence. So that is the symbol of the Immortan Joe, emblazoned on everything that he owns. And that is our hero, the Imperator Furiosa, walking to her war rig. Now, all of these vehicles were made almost from scratch and shipped to Namibia in the middle of the desert for the filming.
And they've all got their own personal backstories. That book, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, is that what it is?
Blood, Sweat, and Chrome.
Yeah, they detail to a certain degree the amount of effort put into just building the entire armada. And it was definitely a labor of love, and they got some pretty inspired builds.
Yeah, it seems to be an engineering marvel, and some of it was just seemed crazy to me, like the Immortan Joes was 2 Cadillacs that were seemed basically on top of each other, because the only way that you can impress somebody is to have 2 instead of 1, I guess. And I like this, the cod piece, symbol.
It's a nice touch.
of the Immortan going right over his dick. And there's a lot of...
But this is one of the beauties of the whole movie, right? They don't have to sit there and explain exactly what's going on, what's wrong with the folks. You know,
right.
You kind of get immediately, just through the visual storytelling, the hierarchy. That, Immortan Joe is obviously badly damaged, but still holds great power. Mm-hmm. And just the different mechanisms, which... I've got a lot of questions regarding how this setup would actually work with the waterfall and all that. This engineering level, post-apocalyptic, seems very hard to pull off, frankly. But that's not important.
Right.
And just this little sequence here with very little hand-holding establishes this entire society such as it is.
Yeah. The medical situation with the ventilators. Mm-hmm. The retrofitted everything. Everything is retrofitted. And I think I read in a book where one person said that every time they invented one thing, it had to have 3 functions.
Right. Which would make a lot of sense. And it shows just how much thought got put into this movie. I guess 30 years of development would do that.
Oh, it's crazy. It was something that I think it entered his mind in 1992, and he'd been working on it pretty much nonstop until it was edited together. And that's one of the very few full CGI shots of the crowd there, because they just didn't have the money for the extras. You couldn't get that many extras out in the movie.
But this is a great example of what the strength of the movie is. The CGI, you have to use CGI in modern action filmmaking, especially. But not relying on it to tell the visual story, but rather supplementing some of the sequences that just are impractical or impossible to film practically.
Right. In order to get your point across. And this was a budget of, I think it was $105 or $106 million.
And it's a bargain.
It is. It made 450 or something, but it ran over budget. It ran about 23 or $25 million over budget, and they went over, I think, by 3 months. And we'll get into why that was as we went. But like you say, the ventilator that's on his back, or the fact that he's painted teeth on the front of his mask, teeth that seem to open later in the film when he's angry.
Right.
There's a lot of things going on here that are unexplained. We're not told everything, and I don't want to be told. I'd rather think about it.
Right, and to a certain degree, that not to a certain degree, that is the beauty of the movie. You know, there's a whole imagined world here with remarkable levels of detail that you can figure it out. And whatever you think of is undoubtedly going to be probably better than if they'd have shown it to you anyway.
And the war rig has 2 V8 engines in it. And I don't understand. I'm going to have somebody who knows explain to me, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know how mechanically you could pull that off, but
it's impressive.
V16 is obviously better.
Yes. Well, like the Duesenberg, I think, was the largest single engine block ever created for a V.
That sounds
I think it was
accurate.
like a
I'm sure there's
V16
people
or something of that
listening to
nature.
already
Jay
turned
Leno
off 'cause
has
we're wrong.
one. Yeah, there's plenty of people that tell us we're wrong. Okay, so they're on their way to guzzling. Another thing that I didn't particularly get until I read the book, which is fine. It never bothered me that I didn't get this. But Morton Joe is trading water to other settlements for other items.
Gasoline.
Right, Guzzling, which is at Gas City, and then the Bullet Farm, which I'm guessing is an armory.
Yes.
Now, the War Boys, I like this aspect of it. The War Boys are blood boosting. Mm-hmm. They're Lance Armstronging their way through their cancer diagnosis. And since Mad Max is O positive, he's a valuable resource.
Right, he's up there. He's top 3 or 4 resources available to him. Mm-hmm. And they must have some tremendous German doctors there.
Well, and one of the things that I like about Miller does this in all of his films, not just in Fury Road, but he really takes advantage of it, is Miller is not afraid of people who don't look like Charlize Theron. People who are not models.
Yeah, they're rather unusual looking. Unconventional is a good way to put it.
Amputees or unconventional is a very good way to put it. There are people that would be derogatory, and I don't think that those words are useful in describing, but there are lots of overweight people and people who fit a different image of what he wants to show you on screen.
Oh yeah, if you look at the gyro captain from The Road Warrior.
I love, Brent Spencer.
Gotcha.
Who's also the mouth of Sauron.
Yes. And then played some unrelated role completely in Thunderdome, but hey.
Oh, no, he was the gyro captain in Thunderdome.
No, it was a different character.
Was it?
Yeah, it was a different character. That's
the same actor.
But same actor, yes, but different role. But not unlike this, where the toe cutter is a Morton Joe, and there's no relationship between the two characters, but you do utilize the same, again, rather unconventional looking actor.
Well, I had no idea that a Morton Joe was the same actor as the toe cutter.
No, wouldn't have known that if it were not for the mysteries of the internet.
Yeah.
And the mother's milk part. Now, this part does, frankly, turn my stomach just a tad.
Oh, there's lots of it, and because of what they're doing with the milk and why they're harvesting it, right? So in that aspect, it's like Miller is fucking with you, right? Like, because we're not put off by the overweight people or the amputees or the people who you would say have special needs or deformed, but harvesting breast milk for your own satisfaction
might be crossing over the line.
That's disgusting.
Yes, that is quite disturbing. It really establishes Morton Joe as a evil soul. Now, this is really nice. This greenhouse.
Yeah.
But again, it's just one part of the building blocks that doesn't get really acknowledged beyond that single scene.
Yeah. And the vault. And all of this, by the way, was shot last. The bookends, the first, the Citadel in the beginning and the Citadel in the end, those are the bookends. Those were shot last, and they were almost not shot.
Right, and there was a lot of things that were cut out that, from the book, sounded actually fascinating.
Yeah, the gyroscopic fight sequence, that was the first thing to go. When the minute he got into the desert, there was a producer with Warner Brothers who basically followed him out there and said, okay, well, we got to cut 4 weeks. And so that's what they cut.
Which financially, it makes sense. It's just an unfortunate loss.
Yeah.
Of course, who knows? Maybe it would have been cut or not improved the film in the slightest.
It's a pretty strong film. I don't know if it was another 20 minutes or 30 minutes that it would basically help. I like it that it's tight.
No, absolutely. But how long, what is the total length of this?
2 hours and like 23 seconds.
Right. So you could make a pretty good argument that even if it was 90 minutes, you would have walked in and said, okay, I couldn't imagine any longer. Okay,
this is one of the places where I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I described this to my wife. I came home from the theater and I was like, you have got to listen to me tell you about these guys banging on the drums, and then it's lowered, and then I told her about the Doof Warrior, which we'll see later, with the double string guitar and the fucking fire shooting out the top neck. And it reminded me a lot, and I am so glad I wasn't alone in this thought, because I heard Kevin Smith on a podcast say the same thing. It reminded me a lot how the Scots would go into Mattel, and they would blow bagpipes. Yeah. And I'm sure that was intentional.
Oh, I don't doubt it for a second.
So here the Valhalla sign with the fingers, the V.
The V8.
And the V8, which is
the 8 fingers and the V.
Right. Yeah, they're not putting their thumbs up. Right. The pistons. And nobody can go anywhere without a steering wheel. So.
And this is one of the few things that they seem to own as individuals. Right. There does appear to be a lot of communal aspects of this society, such as it is. But the ownership of your own steering wheel, correlating with your own vehicle, appears to be one of the only things that identifies these individuals, the war boys, as unique.
Yeah. And
because otherwise they look identical. They act identical.
Well, they're child soldiers.
Right. But it is, by design, they're somewhat indistinguishable. They're basically stormtroopers.
Right. Right. Yeah, and altering themselves to look like, you know, a skeleton warriors, because it's all about facing their own mortality, and that's why Immortan Joe is so important to them. Really, is because he's lived so long.
Yes, he's essentially immortal. He is the Moses of his people.
Yeah,
he led them to the water.
Until we see the Vuvalini in the ending, he's really the oldest person on screen that we see. Mm-hmm. I love this car. It's a 32 Ford Eliminator.
It's got a special place in our hearts.
It does. If you're a ZZ Top fan. This is the shot with the guys on the drums and the pan around to the side and the Doof Warrior just rocking the fuck out with the...
Yes, and like you, I saw this in the theater, and unlike you, I saw it actually with my wife. This was a date night because, you know, we're weird like that. Yeah. But it was one of those that when you get to this scene, you're sitting there slack-jawed, and either at that point you completely buy into it, you're getting ready to leave the theater saying this is patently absurd. And it could go either way, but the execution is so well done and so uncommon. Now, this is nice where he looks at me, you know.
Right. Well, then that goes into the cult of personality, which goes in deep. As the film goes on, you start to realize that Immortan Joe he's controlling everything. Mm-hmm. It's like he's running a theocracy. He's a religious center. He's the head of state. He's the military commander. You can tell by the medals on his chest, which I would, assuming in this future, mean nothing.
No, but they are establishing him as he who deserves your respect. Whether he actually even earned those medals is probably debatable.
Right.
Because really, there's no compelling reason he should be in charge. He's old. He's physically large, but with the sports that he has, he's by himself probably quite weak.
Well, it looks like he's using his son, whose name is Rictus Erectus, the big boy. It looks like he's using him as an enforcer. And then the war boys, including the Imperator Furiosa, it looks like they've got grease or motor oil smeared on their head, and this is almost like Indians or Native Americans before they go into battle, you know. marking up their face or shaving into mohawks, just like Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver.
Or the previously referenced Scottish Warriors.
Right. Yeah.
And this is interesting. You have this completely separate group of the Cars That Ate Paris showing up, and you don't question it. They're, I guess, basically the sand people, if you will.
Well, that's what I was thinking, and I'm sure that's... I'm sure that was a deliberate
It wouldn't surprise me. Actually,
homage.
If he claimed he'd never seen Star Wars, he'd probably be being completely intellectually dishonest.
It would surprise me.
But this is where it really starts to kick up again. And what do we have here? 45 minutes of nonstop?
I clocked it this morning. It's 30.
Okay.
Before you can breathe, it's 30.
Yes, and that is the great thing. And they should re-release this in the theaters if people would go. Just to have this sheer spectacle occupying, overwhelming your senses.
Well, what I told my mother was that this was not a movie. This was an experience.
That's pretty accurate in a lot of regard.
Yeah. And everything that goes along with it is just bonus. I'm sure that motorcycle flipping over the camera was CGI, but I wouldn't
be surprised if it was, but I wouldn't say I'm sure that it was.
Yeah. Well, like that guy coming, I mean, there was a clear fade from one image to another, and I think the second image was like a half second or a full second of CGI. Like, that's real. They just slowed down the camera.
No, absolutely.
And there was most of the CGI in the film is actually just erasing wires and other safety vehicles driving behind other vehicles.
And changing, basically the skyline and small details that matter. But
yeah, very
little of the actual stunt work is false. And this is absolutely amazing.
It does. Just the collisions are, it's just crazy.
And to a certain degree, this is almost this is basically a replay of the end of the Road Warrior.
Right.
Just amped up to somewhere between 10 and 35.
Well, I don't want to jump too far back into the Road Warrior, but one of the most indelible images of my childhood is like the Road Warrior is actually, like, to me, a horror movie. And that feral kid on the hood of the truck going for the bullets, and Max just screaming at him like, "Get the bullets! Get the bullets!" And then of course the hand comes over the hood, and then there's the collision when Max pulls the kid back into the cab. Like, that's terrifying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And especially to however old I was when I saw it, 8 or 9, and it just seems like there's probably 4 or 5 of those images in this film. I mean, Max being on the edge of this Lancer, so he is scared shitless this entire time, and he is dumping adrenaline into his blood.
Oh yeah,
and that adrenaline is going right into Nux, who is then using it to
do his attacks.
Right. The double crossbow. So here's the entrance into Valhalla, the first one that we see. And everyone is urging him on. So,
and the use of the chrome spray paint, which is
so
very unusual touch.
You can enter Valhalla all shiny and new, right? Because he's going to die anyway. He's got lumps. He's got mumps.
He's got a couple lances.
Right. So this is a way for him to... Oh, my God. Witness me, brother. That was one of the lines that came out of this film that went on for months and months and months. So Theron had that arm constructed for her. She wore a green sleeve over her arm to operate it, and then they just painted that part out. I thought that was brilliant. And we should remember that George Miller actually is a trained medical doctor. He was accredited. He had a license. He practiced medicine in Australia for a few years. And
saw a whole bunch of bad auto wreck victims in the ER, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if it was necessarily an inspiration, but I'm sure it was for the original Mad Max.
Well, I think that he was just rather used to seeing things that a lot of us don't see. And I think he's very familiar with, like, one of the war boys that's on Furiosa's war rig has got this pull to his lip, probably because there's something muscular wrong with his face. And it wouldn't surprise me if Miller said, find me an actor, or ran across that actor and said, I could use this actor in this film for this purpose. And actually, I like that character who is misled. Furiosa's lying to him and misleads him, and then he turns when he figures out what's going on. And you're going to remember him because of that.
Right, and he's one of the few war boys that is acknowledged, they give him a personality of sorts.
Right. Right, the rest of them are all kind of Hitler Youth. So here's a slight breath of air, but right when you catch your breath, you're going right into the storm. And Max at any moment is like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die this second, or I'm going to die the next second. And that's fine with all the other war boys.
That's really not what he had scheduled for the day.
Yeah. Because what I love about this, up to a certain point, and we'll get to that one point later, but what I love about the first half of the movie really is Max is a survivor. He is all about surviving, just living through the next moment. And the desperation he has, and what is alluded to, what has been taken from him, his family and child and so forth, this horrible past that he has, it's led him into that mode. There's the guy.
And there's Max's double-barrel shotgun.
Crew is his name. And then he figures out she's in on it. And I do miss Crew. And I like that Furiosa has, like, these things that when we were kids, you'd go into a shoe shop and they would have, like, a measurement scale, a sizer. And that's her accelerator.
That's the gas pedal.
Yeah. And she can lock it down and slip it up into place. And
it's a pretty good cruise control.
And and it serves two purposes. The Doof Warrior here. Now, one thing, the director of photography, whose name was John Seal, Miller told him that he wanted the subject of every shot to be in the center because there was so much going on and so much action was moving. He didn't want the audience to have to look around too much. And really, the only other place I saw that just done to the nth degree was The Social Network with David Fincher. Even camera pans, left, right, up, center, diagonal, they were all tracking shots of someone's, basically the nose or the eyes were at the very center of the camera the entire time.
I hadn't really noticed that, but yes, it's a good point. And here they go to enter the storm.
Yeah. Now, this is really, the CGI really kicks in, and it'll go every shot until the end. But you obviously can't recreate a sandstorm. Steven Soderbergh saw this, and he said, I can't believe you didn't kill 4 or 5 people making this movie, and I can't believe that you're not still out in the desert making that movie.
And I can't believe he's trying to make another one.
Yeah, Furiosa, which Rap Production, Chris Hemsworth is in it. He came back from Namibia about 4 or 5 weeks ago to push another one of his films, and he said they're done.
But I wonder how long that will be in post-production.
Oh,
Is there an anticipated release date, or is it still TBD?
Summer 2024.
Yeah, it seems fair.
Yeah. John Seale's history, you'll be really happy with. One of his first films was BMX Bandits, 1983, with Nicole Kidman. One of my favorite movies as a kid.
Yes, but I don't think I like it as much as Rad.
I preferred it over Rad.
Oh, well, there you
You're
go.
a Rad guy.
Different folks, different strokes.
Yeah, it's like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Rad or BMX Bandits. He did Witness, The Hitcher.
No, that's a piece of work.
That's an exceptional movie. Children of a Lesser God, The Mosquito Coast, Stake Out, Gorillas in the Mist, Rain Man, Dead Poets Society, Lorenzo's Oil, The Firm, The Paper, The English Patient, The Talented Mr. Ripley, Harry Potter 1, and Cold Mountain. He came out of retirement to do this one. And then he went back into retirement. So here, Nux is getting ready to die. This is his entire point. He sprays himself.
This is his entire point of living, right here. Max doesn't appear to be on board with this plan. It's shocking, rather.
Yeah. But this does, there are people who think this. This is not outside the realm of reality. Like, I don't remember him, Harry Morgenthau, one of Harry Truman's advisors. Mm-hmm. When Harry Truman signed the paper that was made the United States the first nation to recognize the state of Israel, Harry Morgenthau told Harry Truman, he said, God put you into your mother's womb for this purpose.
For this moment.
And Truman thought that. He thought, Harry's right. This was the point of my existence. And then you fade to black after that enormous
It is the first time
crash.
you have silence in the entire movie. Maybe the only time you have silence.
Now, this is so important to me. The next 5 minutes is so important to me. The trauma that Max goes through when he pulls his head up. This is how real people come to after a concussion. And how you can see every grain of sand, especially if you were seeing this in a theater, mm-hmm. fall from his head, and he pulls himself up. I had a picture of Max, Nux over his shoulder, holding the door, and his gun in his hand. I had a picture of that on my door, on my office in Canada. And I said, this is what it's like to work here. As you go through these experiences, I mean, just look at him just freaking out. This is method acting to the nth degree. And Tom Hardy here, he sold me. I wasn't big on this until I saw this shot sequence of him just trying to get over the trauma that he just survived. But going through this series of events in which he tries to do something and can't do something, each for different reasons. The chain is going through the door. The chain is attached to Nux. He pulls Nux out, can't get the chain off of Nux's wrist, decides very quickly,
just blast that wrist off.
I'm going to blow the wrist off. But if you see Max's reaction when he picks up the shotgun and dusts off the shells, he doesn't want to do it. He delays.
Those shells are pretty valuable.
Well, that's it. That could be it, or it just could be that Max, being a former cop, he does not take any delight in doing this. He'll do it, mm-hmm. but he doesn't see. There's like a reaction. He doesn't want to, but he does. He does it, but it doesn't work. Gun doesn't.
Gun fails.
Right. He's masked up. He can't. So he's trying to like chew
his way through.
Yeah.
He is basically an animal that's been caught in a trap. And
well,
is willing to shoot his
and that's why it says it's tattooed on his back, feral. Mm-hmm. They treated him like an animal, and that's the way the war boys saw him when they picked him up. So in between the time they got him and the time they turned him into a blood bag, I'm sure
he was undoubtedly not cooperative.
Right. He was pretty messed up. So this here, holding the gun, carrying Nux, with a shotgun that doesn't work, with a mask over his face, that's how it felt to work in Canada for a while. And I love his reaction when he turns around. He's ready to kill anybody he has to, but he can't. He's got to bluff his way through it. Mm-hmm. There, that shot there, that was what I put in the door. And what does he see? These 5 angels in the desert.
It's reasonable. The pause.
Like, am I hallucinating?
But he does get his senses pretty quick.
Yeah. And of course the
removal of the chastity belts.
Yeah.
With the teeth. It's But again, it's one of those really delightful moments where picture taking the place of 1,000 words.
And each one has their own backstory, and Miller actually brought in a psychoanalyst who helped these 5 actors create their backstories. He's so thirsty, you can see it. So Rose Huntington Whiteley plays the splendid Angarad. She's the pregnant one. Cheeto is Courtney Eaton. The Dag is Abby Lee. Capable is Riley Keough. And Toast, of course, we would know now is Zoe Kravitz, who was an up-and-coming actor then, but now, of course, she's
a little bit more established.
Yeah, especially after the Batman. They look like they've had the same treatment on their skin that some of the War Boys had. It's not like a tattoo, but it's like some sort of dermal manipulation.
But what's really nice about this scene, in my opinion, is it's basically a silent film.
Well, to me, the whole...
To a large degree, the movie could be a silent film. But, this part especially...
Yeah,
I mean, he communicates with grunts and gestures.
Yeah, Max has 18 lines of dialogue. And they're all scared of him, of course, but he's just bluffing the entire time. So we, the audience, know that he's bluffing.
Right.
And in reality, would he hurt any of them? Probably not, but he's so desperate. I got to hand it her for having the horsepower to hit that chain. And this ensues this enormous fight between these two people who really, we find out from reading the book, truly hate each other.
Yes. Yeah. At this point...
Go ahead.
Oh, no. At this point, everybody realizes he was bluffing because that gun, again, does not work.
Right.
But this is absolutely one of the more brutal hand-to-hand combat sequences recorded on film in quite a while. It is vicious and clumsy and really intense.
Yeah, this is not like very chained Jackie Chan school type of block.
The choreography is real. You could envision something like this occurring, even though it's a lot less, quote, fun to watch.
Just the desperation in everybody's face.
And this is one of the things I find real refreshing about this movie is there's no kung fu. There's no falsities really to speak of. I mean, Max pretty much trashes her from a physical strength standpoint, which makes sense, right? And she's quite clever and uses her skills.
Yeah.
So it is one of those things where there's a good balance that seems very reasonable and plausible as opposed to a lot of unrealistic, although very enjoyable fight scenes where this one is like, okay, this seems... I mean, we're not going to see it, I hope, ever, but you could see it.
Yeah. Well, Theron, we know from watching other films, and particularly like Atomic Blonde, she will go the mile. She will do whatever she has to do to attain the vision of the director.
Oh, absolutely.
But that was one of the problems they had on the... Here's where he finally gets her to stop. Just stop. He doesn't kill her, though.
Right.
He just wants her to stop. And that's why I don't think that he would have...
Undoubtedly not.
Right. And I think that eventually that's why the girls, I won't say soften to him, but they allow him...
They don't try to kill him every time.
Right. It's because he had the chance.
Mm-hmm.
So shiny, so chrome. So, well, that was one of this fight scene. It took like 2 weeks to shoot this.
I do like how he gets his jacket back.
But it's also one of the reasons why they went out to the desert for 9 months and it wound up being like 13, and they spent another $20-30 million. Is they didn't have a script when they started pre-production,
which is absolutely bananas.
In modern day, I think the last movie that I can remember someone just admitting to a reporter we did not have a script was The Devil's Own.
Okay.
The Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford IRA movie.
And that kind of shows.
Yeah, it does, particularly in the third act, which Harrison Ford admitted, when Brad Pitt was like, this is the biggest bullshit I've ever gone through in my life. And Harrison Ford basically had to pick up the PR piece because Pitt refused to do it. He was like, what Brad was referring to was the script was not finished. And there was no third act before we started filming. That leads me to believe that they put one in by the time they got there. So they didn't have one eventually. But this truly had no shooting script.
Yep. Just images. Basically, the entire movie was told via storyboard.
3,500, I think, is 3,500 individual storyboards.
Which makes a lot of sense because usually a screenplay is approximately 1 page per minute.
Right.
So that ratio would not work on the script of Mad Max Fury Road. You'd have a 30-page script at most.
Right.
For 2 hours and, 12 minutes, 2 minutes?
And it depends on how fast you're editing. And I understand that his wife is an editor. She edited a few of his movies, including, I think, The Road Warrior. And it's like her arm is on the door. I've noticed that.
I've never noticed that before.
That's
Yeah, it is
arm.
one of those where there's a zillion details.
She doesn't have an arm, but it's there.
I have not noticed that before.
So how did she lose her arm? I hope we find out in Furiosa.
See, and I hope we don't.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So anyway, I understand that the storyboards were the individual cuts. So he had the reverse shot. He had all of that planned out. The dialogue was written on the bottom of the card. And it would even have 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 10 seconds, hold, pan right, just like you would normal storyboards.
Well, yeah, I don't think you're trying to imply that they went out there willy-nilly with no plan.
Right.
There was just no script.
There was just no script. Yeah. Yeah. Here she's trying to bargain with him. It's like the one thing he wants right now is that fucking thing off his face.
And a lot of this movie is just negotiations.
Yes. Yes. And so to get back to the storyboards for just a bit while he starts filing very quickly. I understand that a lot of the frustration that originated with Theron and Hardy and then spread to the rest of the crew within a few months was that, how many shots are there of Theron sitting in the driver's seat looking out the window? There's a million of those shots. You could probably grab all of those shots in the span of a week or less.
But they were not.
But they shot
pretty much in sequence.
In sequence and continuity. So they would have to do that setup several times throughout the shoot. You do it on day 1, day 10, day 47, day 48, day 102, day 109. And it's the same effort goes into setting up that shot. If you got to take 6 hours to set up a 2-second shot, but he did it, God knows how many times, 50, 60 times.
Oh, certainly.
Right. And that is a really uneconomical way to shoot a movie. Yeah,
Clint Eastwood would not approve of that shooting style.
No, not at all. Or the guy who shot that really good Wolverine movie.
Mangold?
Yeah. The cinematographer, he had 2 cameras running the entire movie. Even in those tighter room shots with Patrick Stewart. Mm-hmm. He had another one just 10 feet to the left or 10 feet to the right. The DAG.
They have got more than a handful of weapons in this vehicle.
And it looks like 3 skulls on the... So here we go into the canyons. So like I said before, this was shot in Namibia. Namibia was, for, 50, 60 years, it was actually a territory that South Africa had claimed as their own. And the Namibians clearly disagreed with that. They had a revolution in the 80s to get away from South Africa, and the UN sided with them. Namibians didn't want to live in apartheid, obviously. Since the UN recognized them and they've been on the map, They've been a pretty stable republic with a recognized communist party, but it's been so stable that many movies have been shot out there, and that's why George Miller had scouted out and took a look at it. Everything that they needed was about 50 to 55 miles away from that small town on the coast where they flew everything in from Cape Town. I was kind of surprised at the end of the book when they kept sending these producers out. Like I think it was like every month or two.
Yeah, that seems
to
right.
Like you've got to get control of the situation. You've got to stop all this spending. You got to do this. And Miller, of course, was like not listening to any of it. But finally, it was like the president of Warner Brothers had changed over. Mm-hmm. He stopped everything that was in pre-production because that's the nature of Hollywood.
Yeah, it's the nature of a takeover in a new business.
It is. Sure. Whether it's Schlumberger or Paramount,
Brothers.
It happens. And then he fired the guy who ran the live action side of the business, and he was the one who greenlit Fury Road, where all the money was just flying out the door. And then the new person came in charge, whose name was, I think, Jeff Rubinoff.
Sounds right.
And he took a private jet from Burbank to this little small town and shut down production for 3 days and tried to get a hold on the situation and said, basically, you're done in 2 weeks. You're done in 2 weeks. And Miller promised on a stack of Bibles, I am done in 2 weeks. Then that guy left, and then they went right back to
doing what he was doing.
Yeah, and I think it was the lady who played the Capable, Riley Keough. I think she said in the book that they're all wondering, well, so how much did it cost you to fly from private jet direct here from Burbank?
It may have been a day or two.
Was that a day of production? Mm-hmm. And, of course, they shut down for 3, but then, of course, the second and the third unit were still operating because they were basically cheating. And, of course, it's digital. They shot this on, I'm sure, something like a Red. Mm-hmm. And I don't even want to think about what it's like to operate a Red in this environment.
Well, it's certainly better than a actual 35 millimeter, which would have been eaten alive.
Oh, because of the heat?
The heat and the dust.
Oh, the dust. Oh, my God. Yeah, we got to talk about Babylon later.
I have not seen that.
So this entire scene, this elicited an emotional reaction from me this morning where I actually was on Capable's level. I got into her head, and then she says, then who killed the world? And she shoved him out the door. Mm-hmm. That line resonated with me so hard after watching this 2 or 3 times here recently. Who did kill the world? I think it's people like Immortan Joe.
That's certainly basically everybody who's still alive.
Yeah, not him. Like he was probably some street thug who just took over after the fact, right? But there's no difference between him and the people who killed the world. And it was that type of thinking. That's the same type of thinking that he's using to enforce his rule is what led to this situation to begin with. It's this deeper analysis of just very simple lines of dialogue like that I found really compelling.
Yes, the wives are a little bit more educated than you would have anticipated them being in a circumstances such as this.
They're all pretty independent.
Right.
You know? And all they needed was to meet the right person, and that right person was Furiosa. Because they're all very brave.
Yes.
I think it was Tom Hardy's stunt double and Charlize Theron's stunt double. They got married and they met on the set and had a kid. And
yeah, no, you're right.
well, that's what happens when you're in the desert for 13 months.
Apparently, yeah.
You know, there were almost 1,000 people, cast and crew, out on location. I'm sorry, I said before that Max has 18 lines of dialogue in this film. He doesn't. He has 52. Mel Gibson had 18 lines of dialogue in The Road Warrior, which I'm sure that's probably more like 12.
Yeah, it certainly feels like it.
That is a silent film.
Mm-hmm.
Even when Humongous is like giving a speech, you can't hear him.
Yeah, it's inaudible to a large degree. Or unintelligible is probably a better way to put it.
So they were ready to shoot this in 2001. The entire backstory of how they got to shoot this, I think they shot this in 11 or 12, and it took all of 13 to edit, and I think it was released in 15.
In 15?
Yeah. George Miller sold all of his Mad Max rights to Warner Brothers when they did Thunderdome.
Okay.
Because that was part of the deal. And of course they gave him like an enormous 4 or 5 picture deal or whatever, and an enormous amount of cash, I'm sure. And so he gave up all those rights, which, I mean, studios need those rights in order to promote those films. That's just how it's going to happen. And then he got involved into Contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so they signed on Jodie Foster, and they were heading very quickly in that direction. And in the process, he bought Carl Sagan's rights to do Contact. So it wasn't heading in the direction that Warner Brothers wanted to go, so they fired him. And then Miller's point was, you can't fire me. I have the rights. Like, you can't do anything with this film without me assenting to it. So this was a bad move on your part. So he sued them.
Mm-hmm.
So it wound up in court for a year or two, but basically Warner Brothers needed to make money now, and they didn't ever see another Mad Max film being made. So they traded the rights for Mad Max for the rights for Contact. So Miller got completely cut out of the deal for Contact, and he got his rights to Mad Max back. So when he later on he was interested because of the TV show interest that came up later in the 90s. He said, "Oh, okay, I could do this." 92 or 93, I think it was. So he had those rights. So he started developing it. He took it to Fox. Mm-hmm. Fox gave him, I think, a grand total of $20 or $30 million, and he got to the developmental stage. And the very next point was, okay, cast, set a production date, let's go. And that was in 2001. So they got down to, I think it was 3 or 4 months out, and Fox pulled the plug. They were like, this is getting too expensive.
Yeah, there's no way we're going to be able to make this financially viable for us.
Right. So they wrote it off. They just took the loss. Then in 2008, he went back to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers said, okay, we'll do it. They put an equal amount of money down. They actually built the cars in Sydney, shipped them to Namibia. They had a crew in Namibia, I think of about 50 people who were getting ready for production. They signed on at the time. Did they sign on Mel Gibson?
I don't know if they actually ever signed him on. They very well might have, but I know that the discussions were very deep at that point. Yes.
Yeah, because I don't remember when the big fallout was. Mm-hmm. It was after Passion of the Christ. I think it was around 2006, 2007. It was around that time period sometime. And they did think of Tom Hardy. They did think of Eminem was one of the names.
Yeah, I saw that.
Around.
I cannot imagine that working at all.
No, not for something like this.
Tom Hardy does make some sense, although I do wonder what would have happened had they just cast Mel Gibson at this point. And I think it was one of those where he didn't really want to do it at this point in his career, and also still a lot of radiation associated with him, obviously. Yeah. But an older Mad Max in this storyline probably would have worked tremendously well. And I think it may have been hard to imagine maybe a better movie. It's hard to say, of course. But this one works so phenomenal, which it just has no right to work this well. But I can't believe he pulled it off. He's got his boot.
This movie is so good, and to a large extent, Tom Hardy's just one gear.
Yeah, he is
this enormous machine.
He's barely a supporting character in this movie,
right? Whereas in The Road Warrior specifically, it's like there is no movie without Mel Gibson,
right?
And however, I did deep think about this today. And about how the relationship with Furiosa would probably be more of like a father-daughter dynamic.
It's plausible, for sure. And I don't think that would have... It's hard to say if that would have worked or would not have worked. But if you did have an older Mel Gibson, Yes. But then it would have been possibly a pretty good counter to the older Immortan Joe. So it would have been one of those things where it would have been an interesting dynamic. But all that being acknowledged and theorized, Tom Hardy pulls it off, which I would not have guessed, because Tom Hardy is actually not one of my more cherished actors.
Yeah, he's not a guy that I ever would have gone to for something like this.
No, but it makes all the sense in the world when you see it.
It does, and it's definitely, he's not as emotive as Mel Gibson.
No, he doesn't seem to have the rage that Mel Gibson can seem to kind of tap into.
Yeah.
Because, well, Mel's got some challenges.
He's got rage issues for sure.
Yes, he does.
But Hardy
apparently is kind of a prickly cat himself, though.
He had a rough childhood, too, and he was an addict when he was younger. And
this was a really clever... I'm sorry to interrupt this.
Yeah.
The extinguishing of the fire by using the droppable, cattle guard is really a clever... Sorry, we've got dogs desperately trying to break into the office.
Look at this old M1 carbine from World War I. I'm sorry, World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's lots of things like that. Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, that... Who's to say if that was real or not? I mean, that was so well done.
Yes, the editing really works well for this movie.
Just the desperation on a second-by-second basis. And then, of course... The Agahad looks like she's about to go into labor any minute.
Mm-hmm.
This is when they lose the pod. I mean, this looks like a 1947 Chevrolet or something. It's just completely jacked up. And is this where the jump is?
I believe so.
Yeah. That shot of her looking out the right was in the trailer. And be careful of the wives. No more flames. Don't cook them.
It's amazing. Rictus, of all people, is the one who realizes that, because it does not strike me as the sharpest tack.
Yeah. Then a war boy saves his life.
No greater honor.
Well, he is a Morton. This is utterly amazing. It's like being blessed by God. I can do this. Take my gun. And then he's got his own can to bless people.
Mm-hmm.
See how his teeth are closed here? Then later on, they're going to be open. Shiny and chrome. He's about to cry. It's like an emotional...
Yes, it is easily the most important event in his entire life.
Yeah.
Which is what makes it really good when he fails in his endeavor and Joe just immediately discards him.
Yeah. And I was wondering how he failed till I saw it this morning in his change. Just what a dumbass.
Mediocre. This is one of those things where the subtitling really works.
Here's jump. Oh my God.
And none of the stunt people fly off. That's amazing.
Yeah.
They must have been chained in pretty tight.
And I'm sure he's wired in. Like they
sure.
all have to be wired in.
Yeah, it is total chaos, but it's certainly controlled chaos and very well planned, and probably not chaotic at all.
Yeah. So Max's hand is caught. So now you're wondering, is he going to wind up the same as Furiosa?
Mm-hmm.
Notice she's using her right hand to...
And the bolt cutters come back for a huge return.
Yeah. Thank God you got that kitchen wrench to steer. And here he's trying to warn her.
Well, that is easily the most valuable commodity in this entire world right now is the healthy, pregnant woman.
Yeah. And that's how he views them, as commodities.
Yeah.
Good job. There's a GIF. She's bleeding through the leg and falls in the door. And this is painful, just watching her just roll under. And there's a split second you actually see her body just twist under the car. It's horrible. Miller knew to show it so fast.
Yeah, you can't dwell on something like that.
No.
You would lose your audience immediately.
Yeah. And then Max immediately has a flashback about something that happened to him that was probably pretty similar. And if you'd seen the first Mad Max,
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's not clear if that is a callback to his family or something that happened post-Road Warrior, but to a large degree, I do think of this as more of a sequel to the Road Warrior than, Thunderdome.
Right. Okay. A lot of people like to think that Thunderdome never happened.
I can get on board with that thought. And there's the mouth that is
the
open.
mouth is open. You can see his teeth inside, too. It's just crazy. This reminds me of who was it in Predator, just firing the Bill Duke. Yeah, firing the gun into the forest. There's fresh tracks leading into that desert when the rig went over across the sand. It reminds me of that shot in Lawrence of Arabia where they're on camels and they're crossing the camera pan and they're making fresh tracks. You're just thinking, how in the hell did they do that?
But going back to production, as you were discussing, so what? They initially started anticipating shooting, what were you saying, 2001?
Yeah, that was the first time they tried it, with Fox.
But even with this production, how long was the weather-induced break? Was that?
I don't know. Do you remember? Did they mention it in the book, like how many rain days they had, or? Because I don't imagine.
My recollection was that, they had essentially a once in a lifetime rain and flood event that stopped production for almost a year.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Now, if I'm getting that wrong, this is very embarrassing. But there's only 2 people listening to this at this point, anyway. But that is my recollection. That was a huge wrench that was thrown into the entire plan. Was similar to Apocalypse Now.
Oh yeah.
Where you're trying to shoot in the elements.
Yeah.
And Mother Nature, as much as we try to save her, wants to kill us, and certainly wreaked havoc on man's plans.
I don't recall that. I do remember that after
because it suddenly turned the desert quite green.
So it changed the color palette. Oh my God. Well, that happened to Terry Gilliam when he was shooting The Man of La Mancha back in the 90s.
Did he ever finish that?
Well, no, he didn't. He only made it like 3 days. But that was one of the problems was they were out in the desert and they were shooting like all day, and then a rainstorm came, and they went back the next day to continue shooting, and the water changed the color of the dirt, and there was no way to do it again.
Revert it back, yeah.
Yeah. You can only color correct so much. And of course, they were using film back then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other pause that I remember happening, of course, at the tail end, the president of Warner Brothers himself came out and said, "No, you're closing down in 3 days.
Right.
You do not have it. I am staying here until you close down in 3 days." So they did stop shooting in 3 days, and they destroyed most of the cars. Some of the cars were shipped back to Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
They let a lot of the crew go. They had sets. I think they said they had 22 or 23 sets in Cape Town that they were going to shoot in. They destroyed most of those sets. Some of those sets had been recently completed or only had like a day or 2 left, and they were struck anyway. And so it was this massive waste of material that they could have taken advantage of. But Warner Brothers didn't want them to shoot there anyway. And then it got down to a lot of them went to Cape Town. They had to ship the cars not to Cape Town, to Sydney. They had to ship the cars to Sydney. And a lot of these guys who were production heads, they were using their personal credit cards to keep the filming going.
Keep the filming going.
And Miller, of course, was using his own money just to finish because they didn't have the bookends. They got the final chase, but they didn't have the bookends. So it was basically running on American Express to get those bookends done. Did you find it?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Is that the trivia section of IMDb?
It is not quite there, but we don't want to worry about it right now. We can always input it. Yeah, this whole movie is just fraught with delays, right?
Yes. But even when they went back to do the bookends, it was something like 3 or 4 months later to do the bookends. So they did that in Sydney, and a lot of them couldn't make it back because their lives had moved on, or they had contracts to do other.
Yeah, they had other employment opportunities and commitments, frankly.
Right. So Charlize Theron went back, and she had hair, and so they had to skull cap her, which I was shocked when I heard that because you cannot tell.
Yeah, I would not have anticipated that.
It just looks so good. And then Zoe Kravitz she also had to have a skull cap. Now, this is obviously shot day for night, but it's really good day for night.
Yes. And this is actually a really, really nice sequence. The way where there is obviously a significant firefight, but it all occurs off screen.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of this that, oh my God.
Booby traps, they help.
Yeah, just stopped everything.
And they too are getting stuck in the mud, which does make me wonder, of course.
Well, and that was
why is it muddy?
That was the interceptor they were pushing through the mud. And here's really the first time we see the poles, which come in later. The deficit mounts.
He is definitely an accountant.
Well, that's the guy, if I remember correctly, runs the bullet farm.
Yeah, that's the bullet farmer.
Yeah, and if you there's another scene where you can kind of see like his feet are really messed up. And the first time I saw that, I was like, what is Miller getting at by showing us that? What's the whole point? But it was years later. I saw this documentary about American sailors who had helped detonate these atomic bombs in the Bikini Atoll. Mm-hmm. And I think it was Shad Baker, which was the one they set off. They hung it below a submarine, and the submarine was like 100 feet below the surface. And then they set it off underwater, and they put all these ships in a lagoon to see what ships, how far away from the blast, would attain what type of damage. And a lot of these sailors went out to these ships to look at the livestock and inspect everything. Well, one of those sailors in the 1970s, his radiation sickness was so bad that he had started a lawsuit. He was trying to sue the Navy. And the camera was a close-up crop of his face or chest up. I wish I could remember the name of the documentary. And then at the end of the documentary, it was a full body shot, and his entire right leg looked like a mushroom, an enormous mushroom. And his right hand, too, just looked 4 or 5 times the size. And eventually they were going to have to amputate to the knee and then to the elbow. But they didn't think they were going to be able to save his life. And I think that's what Miller was trying to get. As a doctor, he would have been aware of something like that. That he was exposed. I like these size. Now, this vehicle, which looks like a 72 Dodge Charger.
Oh, and I was totally mistaken.
A tracked vehicle. That's called the Peacemaker.
Yeah. And that's the bullet farmer. I totally made an error earlier.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. The accountant, I think, is from...
He's from Gas
City.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bullet farmer has like a...
He's got the whole shawl and the bandoliers.
Which is pretty impressive, actually. I do remember reading something from Zoe Kravitz saying that it's cold in the desert at night, as you well know. And the crew could wear jackets and parkas and sweaters and things like that. But, these ladies are not wearing anything, really.
Yes, the wives and Nux are a little bit chilly, I'm sure.
Yeah, Nux doesn't wear a shirt for the entire film. And so he's got to be out there in this cold. And Zoe Kravitz says it was just crazy. I mean, this whole sequence, every single shot looks like a painting. And here we go when she says, you've only got like 1 or 2 bullets left or something. He just surrenders the weapon to her because he thinks she can get a better shot than he can.
And uses him as a brace.
Yeah. Don't breathe. And his expression there was pretty classic. But a lot has been made of that moment where, the man couldn't do anything, but the woman can.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot has been made of this being like this very feminist movie. But also, if you read Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, Miller says, I didn't set out to make.
Yeah, I don't know I think that is a legitimate reading of it, but I don't know if it's necessarily the objective.
Right.
Right. And I think that's one of the nice things is you can kind of read it however you think is appropriate.
Yeah, I do like that reading, and I do enjoy the movie for this reason that it seems like it's this ultra violent, over the top, huge testosterone, adrenaline junkie type film. And what it's really about is the sacred power of the feminine that we all must respect. Like it definitely goes in different directions.
Yes.
I think that's why it's more.
Yeah, there's some definite nuance.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a Schwarzenegger film from the 80s as much as I love Schwarzenegger films from the 80s. This isn't The Road Warrior. It's actually a much deeper movie than that, even though it's hard to define exactly how or why, because the story is certainly no more complex.
No, in fact, I was thinking that, the Last Jedi seemed to be somewhat similar in terms of the whole movie as a chase.
Yes, that is true. This is much more logical than that movie and 20 times more enjoyable.
Well, this is more like Thunderdome in terms of Max had gone to a certain place and then he returned.
Right.
And they do much the same here. They do have like these sort of scythes on the rims of the tires.
Mm-hmm.
But everything just seems like is the seat of their pants.
Last second.
Yeah. Skin of their teeth.
Improvises with what's available as best as he can.
But that's probably the way they've lived ever since.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Those that can't are dead.
Right.
Or subjugated.
Margaret Sixel is George Miller's wife. She had 470 hours to edit in this film.
That's probably not even as many as she would have liked.
And she edited most of it when they were still shooting it. And it took her 3 months to watch all the footage.
Which is actually pretty amazing, considering, they didn't have miles of film if it was all digital, but might as well have been.
Yeah. The difference is you don't have to spool it.
Right.
That would obviously increase your time.
But just the sheer volume of images that were recorded and stitching it together into some sort of narrative that makes some sense is a remarkable achievement.
And it's not going to shock anybody to find out that she was nominated for Best Editing at the Academy Awards, and she won.
I was about to say, who won? I hope it was her.
Mad Max was nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, this is one of those uncommon genre flicks that it worked on all levels. It was critically acclaimed, generated awards buzz, and rightfully so.
10 nominations.
And
well, and I think that you had a lot of people, and George Miller was nominated for Best Director too. Mm-hmm. And I know it's because if you go onto the internet, you will find director after director after director, like Robert Rodriguez seeing the trailer at Comic-Con the previous year this came out, and was like, "How the hell did you shoot this?" Rodriguez says it was the most confusing thing he'd ever seen in his life. Like, how is this possible? And I don't know how many people, how many directors are in the Directors Guild, or how many of those directors are members of the Academy, and at least 100. Mm-hmm. 200 is not unfathomable to think. There might be 300. I would say it's probably under 500
that are in the Academy.
Because not members of the Academy, but voting members who are directors. Because
right. Okay, that's what I thought. That's
right in the Academy, only editors can vote for editing. Mm-hmm. Only directors can vote for directing, right, etc. Only producers can vote for Best Picture. So it's not unthinkable to think that those people, the Steven Soderberghs and the Richard Rodriguez's, saw this and thought, "Holy shit!
I know how hard it is to do this."
Exactly, and that's how he got nominated. Beautiful shot. Pain is beauty in this film.
And beauty is pain. Yep.
Borderline sadomasochistic. Pretty crazy. So here's her backstory, which I'm guessing we're going to get into
with a sequel.
Furiosa.
Or, knowing the way these things have worked, it'll be a completely different.
Well, Max is not in it. We know that.
Right, but I'm just saying that the story you would anticipate could be dramatically different than what you actually get.
Well, I hope so.
Probably won't be.
I hope so. George Miller.
What an interesting career he has had.
I mean, he did this after Happy Feet 2.
Mm-hmm. Not Happy Feet 1, but 2.
Yeah. Well, 1 made $100 million.
Yeah.
So they said, "Could you do that again?"
And he said, "Sure."
And it made another $100 million. Babe, Pig of the City, made an enormous amount of money. Mm-hmm. So he directed the sequel, which they said didn't make as much.
But it still probably did just fine.
Yeah. We're talking about 2 movies about a pig. Mm-hmm. 25 years later. It had an impact. I did see 1,000 Years of Longing.
3,000 Years of Longing?
Yeah. I saw that with my son in the theater.
I have not seen that.
That took more patience, and it's not for everyone.
But it had its
moments. I mean, Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton were very, very good on screen together. Not a pairing that you'd think that would work. But I think Miller is very good with putting people together that you wouldn't think.
Right. No, it does. He does have an eye for that.
This actress whose names escape me, Miller told her like 2 or 3 months out, we're going to give you the world's best G-string to stand up here, but we'll cover you with your hair. Everything will be fine. She said she got up there and the wind was everywhere. There was no way to. And of course, this is another like famous GIF of Max waving his finger and saying, "That's bait."
Yes.
I've seen that all over Twitter. So Luke and I now say that whenever. Well, she's got it too. She's got the Immortan Joe symbol hanging from her belt. It's right over her crotch. So this is all a trap. Max knows it's a trap. And who falls for it? The woman. Mm-hmm. So these are the Vuvalini. And apparently on the storyboards they were called the Volvalini. But Warner Brothers was like, you can't
do that.
You can't do
That's
that.
just crossing the line.
So we'll take out that L. And no one will know.
No one will ever figure it out.
What we're talking about.
And where do they get their gasoline?
That's a good question. Runs off of ethanol, maybe? Where do they get their ethanol?
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those, I guess. Come up with your own answer. It works fine.
That's her sister, I believe, or cousin, or someone very close to her. So I thought this was interesting. Like, her name was Furiosa before she left the Green Place.
Yeah, that's not what you would have anticipated.
No, I took it.
She was christened that rather.
Right. I took it like she got her name from the Fury Road.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be the Fury Road got its name from her. Yeah.
Because she is pretty unique among the war boys. Is she a war boy?
No, she's
a
an
lieutenant.
imperator.
An emperor.
Yeah.
I don't recall the entire hierarchy.
In theory, and we're all just making this as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
She's in charge of the war rig, and
Right.
the war boys report to her when they are on this journey. And there must be a cadre of imperators, and she's just one of them.
One of 5 or 15.
Yeah, because in the beginning, Nux asks, they say an imperator has gone rogue, and he's like, which one? And the answer is Furiosa. And they can't believe it. So here,
This is where she gets the bad news at the Green Place.
they just went through it.
Yep. It's no more.
Yeah. When I watched Thunderdome a couple of months ago, and I won't say like it's a completely bad movie.
No, it doesn't work as well, but it's still got its...
It's got its moments, but I really liked when we talked before about Mel Gibson being in this film and how it would have been different. That there's that moment in Thunderdome when he reaches the oasis, and he's done. He's like, I'm never leaving this place.
Right.
I am perfectly fine staying here
For forever.
and dealing with these kids because this is way better than what's out there. And I found that more profound, and I think that one of the problems of that film is that they don't emphasize that.
Mm-hmm.
And if Gibson had been in this film, there's that moment when Tom Hardy decides, let's go back. Let's turn around and go back to the Citadel. Because, it looks like they took out about half of them getting here.
Mm-hmm.
So they could very well take out half of them going back. Of course, they all might be dead by the time they get there. But it's another, as much as I like this film, I don't think there's enough emphasis on that point.
Okay.
Of what does it take for Max to say, I'm going to push aside my trauma, and push aside my survival instinct, and push aside everything.
Right. Why does he make this choice?
Why does he go back? Why does he tell Furiosa?
That's the right way to go.
Yeah. This is like the second time we're silent. Where it's quieter, I should say.
Mm-hmm. So she too is pregnant.
Yes.
Which is known possibly only to her.
That's a strong blue filter on that camera.
Mm-hmm.
And you do see some shadows under the bikes, which is why we know it's day for night. So she is the seed keeper, if I remember correctly.
No, that's correct. Yeah, I believe that is accurate.
And that's the dag. And we went from, having 4 or 5 female cast members. Now we've got like 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so our male cast members are actually dwindling.
And now, right now, it's just the one.
Yeah. And by the end, we're going to have 0. So there is apparently a salt formation that they have to make it across, and that's where their great pause is. Maybe they can ride for 160 days. So I thought about this. This is also going back to Lawrence of Arabia, where they were like, it's 6 or 7 days across this one like flat plain where there is absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a void desert. There's no oasis. We can't go anywhere. It's 6 or 7 days. We have to take whatever water. We have to go at night. And so then I was thinking maybe they have enough to get across 160 days. This has to be an allusion to the outback.
Oh, I suspect you're 100% right, yeah.
Like, I don't know how long it takes to cross the outback on vehicle or foot.
Half a year does seem like quite a while,
like
but
4
considering
months, 5 months.
Yeah, you have no roads.
Just looking at that, I mean, again, just looks like a painting. Him just facing away, or even him just turning over his shoulder and looking, or him just turning back straight into the camera. So that comes up later when he puts his hand up
To block the arrow, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is kind of what causes him to change his direction is he failed before.
Well, in The Road Warrior and in Thunderdome, he makes that decision to help. So we talked about this before we started recording, that thing on his back. I mean, is it a life preserver? What's going on with that? You had a theory?
Oh, not on Max's back.
Yeah.
Oh. I thought you were
referring to
Rictus.
Morton Joe?
No,
or
I thought
Rictus. Rictus has some sort of breather.
Right, that's what I was understanding you were referencing. I assumed this is just a backpack full of supplies or possibly a camelback for water. Or camelback style apparatus.
That would make sense. Yeah, full of water. Aqua-Cola.
It's a very strange reason to not be for it, though. It'll take 2 weeks. Like, you were going to drive for 160 days.
Yeah.
14 is,
Right. That's kind of strange logic.
Mm-hmm.
But here, his plan is, it's what I like about the whole film, is that it's actually quite simple.
Oh, yeah.
It's simple now and it's simple later.
It's not convoluted. It's just a straight path. His plan, kind of like this movie, works because of the audacity.
Well, that's how a lot of battles are won. Audacity.
And I'm sure quite a few are lost in the same method. But
those
are less fun to make movies about.
Of course, when he says nothing but salt, it's almost like a double entendre there. Salt, of course, is you can't grow anything.
There's not a whole
salt.
lot of life in salt.
Right. And then he says the word redemption.
Which, for some reason, is what drives her.
Well, it just seems like she has more than likely done a whole lot of bad things for Morton Joe.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And kind of like the Black Widow from the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to get the red out of her ledger. 2 warriors. Those are the feet that I was referring to before.
And that is so grotesque.
Watching that thing just expand and contract is just creepy.
Mm-hmm.
This shot is the most like the Road Warrior and the Great Humongous.
Yes. I do like how they have to assist him in there. And like I said,
that's just crazy. And, Miller doesn't look at this shot here. Miller does not get, I think, a lot of credit for his ability to block.
Well, no, I guess you're right. He doesn't. But you never really hear of Miller being celebrated among the pantheon, right?
That's right.
But he definitely has the skill, and he's not that prolific.
No, but it does seem like everybody knows his films. Like the Witches of Eastwick, when it came out, was just everybody knew about that film.
And I never think of that as a George Miller film, but it certainly is.
Yeah. And he keeps talking about how that was a big learning experience for him.
Was that his first major Hollywood film?
Yes.
So yeah. I could see why.
Yeah, I would see that. Like this is crazy.
Back.
This is fucking crazy. Like this is one of those scenes like we were talking about how there are 3 or 4 of those big moments like that the Road Warrior had won. This is one of those moments. Like, he's pissed off because they've got the interceptor and they're blowing the nitro straight into the engine.
Straight into the blower, yeah.
Into the turbo. That's just crazy. And then Nux gets out there and he starts like putting the nitro in his mouth.
It's not nitro, it's gasoline.
Gasoline. They're putting gasoline
it right into the intake.
Yeah. That's...
You kind of expect Nux to die by a rod getting shot through the hood. Yeah.
That car, Max's Camaro.
Interceptor.
The Interceptor. It's
a Falcon.
Really?
Yeah. I believe it's a Ford Falcon. It's not a Camaro.
A Ford Falcon?
Yeah, it was an Australia-only vehicle, if I remember correctly.
It just happens to look like a Camaro? It looks like a 77 or 78 Camaro.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to look, and I'm sure that, like, again, the 3 people that are listening to this have probably thrown... cans of beer against the wall saying, "You dipshits!" But I believe it is. I believe it was called a Falcon, if I recall correctly.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm really hesitant anytime I cover a film from another country, particularly Australia, because the Aussies are just so fucking proud of their movie industry.
As you know, it is underappreciated, but it is pretty robust.
It is. And I saw the documentary on Netflix, the Ausploitation documentary. It was brilliant. It was really good. There was another one that was made, and Tarantino was on it. It was like, basically, these are not really the films that you ought to see. Those are just the films that Quentin likes to talk about.
These are the genre of... I'm sure he was a big fan of, Road Games?
I think that was one of them, yeah.
Yeah, that was shot down there.
BMX Bandits was not on that list.
Well, it's no rad.
Yeah, it's no rad. So one of the...
Gosh, this is a shockingly violent sequence.
Oh, I know. And I can't believe just how they're just moving the camera left, right, left, right. Right over them. And oh my God. And he just gets like a satisfaction out of it. It's just disgusting. Yeah, the Interceptor in
regardless of what it actually is.
Regardless of what it actually is on the set, it was known as the Black on Black, which has some sort of Australian connotation to it that I don't understand. And I looked up and I still don't. Like, what? It's like double clutching. Like, even if you drive a standard, because they mention it in Fast and Furious, you're not double clutching like you should. Well, if you're double, like, I don't want to get into it. The double clutching is, as you know, is because we both drive standards. It's actually a fairly complicated
it's not an
sequence
easy process
that you have to pull off in order to actually get some extra horsepower out of what you're doing. And so my son drives a standard too, so he didn't actually know what double clutching was. He just liked the line. I'm like, no, that's actually a thing. Like, you can get more horsepower out of it. I'm sure some of these crazies are double clutching while they're spitting gasoline into their intakes. But when you actually read what it is, it's actually just like extraordinarily difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is not for those who don't have any idea. Although YouTube is making it a lot easier.
Oh my God, Max just taking these people. Okay, so the polecats, like this is one of those things, like, we don't actually know if this is going to work. We're going to put an engine block on one of the end of the poles and
a dude on the other.
Yeah. And Tom Hardy, actually, he saw this in the storyboards and he was like, I don't actually think they're going to shoot this. Like, this is just a sequence that this is never going to take off the ground. Then he showed up at set one day and they actually
have figured it out.
Yeah. And I do remember seeing that one shot in the trailer. Mm-hmm. It was the only trailer of Mad Max I saw, and I didn't see another one because I didn't want to see another one because I wanted to go in
as blind as possible.
But yeah, it's the we talked about it before.
Yeah,
and Tom Hardy was on the pole and was just going right in front of the camera and then away from the camera, and I just thought, oh my God, this movie just looks amazing. I had the same feeling when I saw Die Hard, the trailer for Die Hard 2, when he ejects out of the exploding airplane, and then he's strapped to the seat and he screams into the camera. I was like, oh my God, I got to see this movie. There's Max putting his hand up to his head and getting saved.
The arrow through the hand still gets into his head a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so that's another thing that I really like about the heritage of the films themselves. So the guy driving around with the harpoon here, he takes toast, right? And Zoe Kravitz actually did this. She was wired to this guy, and she actually did that stunt herself, which is like crazy to think about. What is she, like 80 pounds soaking wet?
Oh, probably at most, yes.
What was I saying before?
I like the one-way stop being used as a shield.
Yeah. Double purpose for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the trailer, and the only trailer that I've had recently where I've had that same sort of premonition of, oh, I must see this film. Did you see the fucking Mission Impossible trailer that just came out last month?
Yes, I did.
The last shot of that trailer, I started like laughing out loud in the theater because I had that experience again. Like, this is going to be a batshit crazy movie. I must see this. Now, if we're going to rank them, I'm sure that Fury Road's going to come out on top and Mission Impossible not too far after.
May not be too far behind, yeah.
And, maybe we can put Die Hard 2 further down that.
Die Hard 2 in the end, eventually being a little bit lower, but that's okay. The trailer was real effective.
The trailer was very effective. I think it's Rennie Harlin's only good movie.
No. I like Long Kiss Goodnight.
You're not alone in that thought. Like, I don't care for it, but there are huge defenders of that movie.
Yeah, and Cliffhanger's okay.
There's a rewatchables on Cliffhanger. I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh, and this is probably the most heartbreaking scene because I am a heartless monster. The end of the Interceptor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's horrible how they just decide to crush it and do away with it.
Yeah, this car's been killed at least twice. It'll be back for the next.
Well, and to this day, if you have a supercharged V8 engine in a police car that's specifically meant to hunt down speeders. It's called an interceptor.
Yeah.
Even in the United States, Harris County Sheriff's Office, they put them in Tahoes. They supercharge the Tahoe, and they put interceptor on the back of it. Oh my God.
I mean, it's just a tour de force. Just some of, if not the best action ever captured and edited on film.
What I was trying to get to before, and we keep getting interrupted by the action because it's moving just so fucking fast at this Eisenstein type of editing rate. Max has a brace on his leg.
Yeah.
So,
He got that crushed because it was crushed in the first movie.
In the first movie, it was run over by a motorcycle.
Right.
Yeah. And so he's wearing it in the second film, in The Road Warrior. And then he's got the brace itself is gone, but the bandage he puts on his leg in the Road Warrior is still on his leg when he's in Thunderdome. So there's an amazing amount of continuity even from film to film, even though
the story doesn't necessarily interlock.
Right.
But
I mean, dare say most people who have seen Fury Road did not see the other three films.
Well, I bet you. Gosh, I wonder what percentage didn't see The Road Warrior.
I would say that if they had seen another film, it had to be The Road Warrior. Yeah. This guy's dead. He's put his foot on the gas. Holy shit.
And this is the part that I remember from the trailer.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Of him being on the polecat.
Well, it hasn't happened yet. It's not the polecat, but it's when the tanker
Oh
explodes
my
in the background.
God. That's the shot. That's a shot there.
That's the shot that I recall from the trailer.
Yeah. Where I was like, this just looks crazy.
It's like, I will pay you my $20 and not be mad.
Yeah. For the XD experience and the
That's
super whatever.
I'll see it in the Dolby Cinema.
Like he's going over. That's just. This is nuts. This is now officially nuts. Look at all those cars. It's like 25 or 30 cars.
And the nice thing about this is so well done that, again, as I was referencing, there's kind of a universal appeal where, the critics enjoyed it, the audience obviously enjoyed it, but this is one of those where it's going to be a much bigger audience than just your standard action movie crew. I mean, my wife loved it. My daughter loved it.
Yeah. My wife liked this. I want to show this to my daughter. We went through. We saw The Road Warrior. She actually liked The Road Warrior.
Well, The Road Warrior is tremendous. I mean, it's one of the best movies of the 80s.
Yes, it is.
In the top 100.
I would definitely.
Because it's so well executed. Now, my grandparents saw The Road Warrior. They didn't like it.
Well, would that be like an age thing?
Hey, I'm sure. They said that movie was stupid. I'm like, well, you could look at it like that.
Casablanca, like that's a real movie, not The Road Warrior.
Yeah, what do they know?
Yeah.
It's only top 5.
And one thing that I really was not expecting when I saw this the first time was like the Doof Warrior being involved in the battle.
Right. It is not it's a side character, obviously, but it's not just a one sequence and gone.
And I suppose that's one of those things that I understand that Miller told the cast and the crew is like, listen, we have certain shots in the storyboards and I want to get those shots, but we shouldn't let the shots dictate where the story goes. And what I understand from Charlize Theron when her interview in Blood, Sweat, and Chrome was that nobody actually knew how the movie was going to end even before they shot it.
Mm-hmm.
So despite the fact that they had these very specific things that they needed, nobody knew how the movie was going to end. And Miller was like, yeah, we'll just kind of figure it out where it goes along.
Room.
Yeah. This is crazy. And here they're deliberately using Rictus's bias to manipulate him, which is brilliant. And I love how Max is basically playing distraction with Rictus. Rictus Erectus. Sounds like a Monty Python name. They shouted on was the Life of Brian?
Yes. Biggest Dickus?
Biggest Dickus. But we kind of missed it before, but when Nicholas Hoult, who plays Nux spits in Furiosa's face. She spits in his face, and he spits right back in her face. And Theron doesn't flinch.
Right.
She takes it and just turns right back around. This is killer. This is... I can't believe there's like 3 things going on at the same time. Toast takes it in the face. Imperiosa rips off his face. Max saves her. Toast
takes the wheel.
And then she spits on him. But they never stop. They never stop.
Man, they are touching the hot engine with their bare hands. Very impressive.
Yeah. I'm sure the engine was... I mean, actually, that shot there where they were... That was touching. She put her hand on the glass. There was one shot there when she was on the roof. The dog was on the roof. And the mountains went by. It did actually... That may have been like a CGI background.
Yeah, it might have been, yeah.
But, forgiven. That, like, right there, that's just because of the distance. I did see that with the director of photography, George Miller said, I don't want this to be oversaturated. I don't want this to be bleak. I don't want it to look monochrome.
As naturalistic as possible.
Like other post-apocalyptic movies typically are. I want it to be very colorful as we can be under the circumstances. Oh my God, Rick has taken I mean, this is just crazy. Like, there's no way you could get it off those bolts, but, witness me. And here he decides, I'm going to sacrifice myself for the right thing. And this is the second only full CGI shot in the film.
And this is about the only part that doesn't work for me in the whole movie. I remember watching this in the theater. And this was a effect, not the crash, but the items flying at the audience. That it's like, oh, okay, this is our. It was designed for a 3D experience.
Oh, right.
And it really was jarring to me because I didn't see it in a 3D.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
it's
I
about
can
the
see.
only shot in the whole movie that doesn't really work for me, and I know that people say, well. That must matter.
No, I remember when Avatar came out. When was that? 2006.
That sounds right.
And you had gone and seen it and had come back and you said, no, you should see it. I didn't want to see it. You were like, no, you should see it. It's pretty good because it's the first 3D movie in which people are not doing this.
Right. It actually worked.
Yeah. And for our audience, I'm actually like thrusting my hand in Dave's face. I'm not doing this. Like Jaws 3D or something like that. But that was a kind of 3D moment.
Yes.
Yeah. And this reminds me of Three Kings, where we got to get air back into our lungs. Furiosa is banged up bad. And that's another thing I liked about it. She's actually pale here. Like, she's like deathly pale. Like, it's like her skin is not getting enough blood. And I think that's goes back to Miller, who knows what it looks like when skin doesn't get enough blood. There's a lot of things about anatomy in his films that are directly tied to, Well, Lorenzo's Oil, I don't know if you've ever seen
Actually,
it.
I haven't seen Lorenzo's Oil.
It famously rips off the entire soundtrack from Platoon. It's like they ran out of money and were like, let's just get a soundtrack that we already... It's the same fucking soundtrack. I don't mean like same composer...
And they thought this was a good match.
They thought it was a good match. So it's very bizarre because she's like, that's the same string section you hear when Elias is getting cut down into fields. So it's very weird. But at the same time, like as a medical drama, I don't think there is a better person to direct it.
No, that does make a lot of sense.
Because there are points where it gets very technical and you can get lost. And I'm not a big fan of Nick Nolte and Susan Sarandon, but Miller makes that movie work.
Make a good movie.
Yeah. And then he says, "Hey, my name's Max." Okay, so he thinks that she's going to die. That's why he's saying his name, right? Like he just thinks that she's going to die. And he doesn't want her to die because he feel like he fails again.
Right.
This guy's pretty awesome. That goes back to, and we kind of hit it before, as we move back into the Citadel, there's a certain segment of the population which is used to hiding and being out of our vision, out of our pocket for various reasons, whether they're veterans or people with accidents or people with birth defects. And Miller just doesn't give a shit.
No.
Miller's, you can be in my movie because it establishes my point, my environment, my atmosphere. That's an amazing shot. That's like a poster on a wall. There's certain stuff in here kind of reminds me of Triumph of the Will.
Okay.
Just how they're lined up on both sides. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's like deliberate, like it is in Star Wars. It's deliberate, but
I don't know if it's deliberate so much as it's just an iconic graphic shot, and it's easy to draw and be inspired by it. It's effective.
Child warriors.
Mm-hmm.
This was when he wrote this in the early 2000s, when it really started coming together, this was a huge issue, particularly in Africa.
Oh,
the warlords taking children and teaching them how to kill, and then using that guilt as teenagers to keep them in line.
I guess that's explored in that Beasts of No Nation.
I haven't seen that.
I haven't either. I don't really want to see it.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not a topic that.
No, it's not one of those where it's like, oh, I'll spend an enjoyable 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Like Blood Diamond.
Never saw Blood Diamond.
Yeah, very good, but it does explore that topic. Toast looks like, who's the girl from Batman?
Zoe Kravitz?
Julie Newmar.
Oh, okay.
She looked like statuesque is what I want to say. I think that's the line from that movie with Patrick Swayze. Tu Wong Fu thinks for everything Julie Newmar. They call her like this. She's this statuesque person. That's what Zoe Kravitz looked like to me there. Not to take anything away from Riley Keough or Abby Lee or Courtney Eaton. Miller was obviously trying to get like supermodels to.
Yeah. How
many supermodels want to go out and spend a year in the desert and freeze?
Apparently 5. And that is about it.
So this is the big ending. Like, what do we do? Does Max go up on the?
No, he does not follow up. He goes off, and just like the end of the Road Warrior, he just is doomed to forever wander the wasteland. But
this apparently was the big issue.
That
the
was
big
the big
thing,
like what to do with him.
What to do with him. And I have to say, like we were talking, again, I don't want to besmirch the name of Tom Hardy here, but if this were Mel Gibson...
It would have been perfect for him just to stay.
Yes, if he were 55.
The end of the road,
yes,
so to speak. He would have stayed.
And I would have been fine with that.
Oh, it would have been a really nice end to the saga, such as it is.
Yeah. And Furios's arm is bare. Where we must go. We who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves. Okay. There we are.
Well, thank you all very much for your patience and understanding. If nothing else, I know you enjoyed a kick-ass action film.
And I hope to see you next time at the Super 70 podcast as we tackle our next subject. But first, a special edition. Thanks for hanging out with us while we watched Mad Max Fury Road. You can rate me on iTunes and wherever you can find podcasts. You can find me, my books, and my blog at thatdylandavis.com, and you can email me anytime at thatdylandavis@gmail.com. I'm Dylan Davis, and we'll see you next time, wherever the hell I want.
press tour, you know, and I was just so done with hair and makeup, and I just literally just had this moment where I was like, I need to shave my head. We need to shave my head. Like, I can't think about what I'm going to do with my hair in this movie anymore. I'm going to be in a desert. I'm a new mother. Let's just shave it and stop talking about it. And I called George because I was so excited that I was, you know, that I had finally come to this conclusion. I think I woke him up at like 3 a.m. and I said, George, we have to shave my head. And he just took this breath. It was like finally he could breathe, and he just went, yes. And so the next day we did it. And I think it was the right decision for the movie. I look at the movie now and I can't even imagine doing it any other way.